Welcome to Figure Eight, where we feature inspiring stories of women entrepreneurs who have grown their businesses to 7 and 8 figures revenue. If you're in the mix of growing a bigger business, these stories are for you. Join us as we explore where the tough spots are, how to overcome them, and how to prepare yourself for the next portion of the climb. I'm your host, Julie Ellis. I'm an author, entrepreneur, and a growth and leadership coach who co-founded, grew, and exited an 8-figure business. This led me to exploring why some women achieve great things. And that led to my book, Big Gorgeous Goals. Let's explore the systems, processes, and people that help us grow our businesses to new heights. If you're interested in growing your business, this podcast will help. Now, let's get going. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Figure Eight. Today, I am joined by Rob and Todd. And in the 1980s, Rob's dad was upset when she bailed on university. And so her dad told her she could come and work for his plumbing wholesale business for 1 year. And 13 years later, he sold her the business, and she built it into something amazing and has her own exit story to tell. And I am very excited to talk with you today. Welcome to the podcast, Rob.
Thank you, Julie. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So you were I think it's a bit of a classic entrepreneurial story in terms of, you weren't fitting into kind of the traditional education path and so decided to try something else. And yes, I can understand why your parents may not have been too happy about that.
Yeah, no, not very happy about that. All their girls were supposed to go to university.
Right. I mean, I feel like that was sort of like the baby boomer generation's promise to their kids, right? Like that, they had accumulated this wealth and they wanted their kids to do better than they did, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And back then, I mean, I don't have kids, so I don't know, but back then it was sort of a golden ticket.
And so you sort of took the golden ticket and said, whack. And then what happened? You went and joined your dad's business, and obviously you stayed.
Yeah, I loved it from day one. He threw me into accounts payable, and I was just eating it up. I realized I loved working for a living. I'd had some odd jobs. I sort of got I left the house after graduating from grade 13 back in the day, and had some odd jobs and sort of starved to death. Uh, well, sorry, that's a bit dramatic. But I definitely had trouble making ends meet. I was buying grapefruit for a dollar and not paying my rent and things like that. And then, yeah, I came home, and so I graduated in June or whatever, and I came home in January and said to mom and dad, it's not working. I can't do it. And that was a great lesson. I mean, it was tough love, but I mean, gentle tough love. Let's be honest. I always had a nest to come back to. And yeah, and then he said, come into the office tomorrow for an interview. And so, yeah, I was I was just lost and got a job, and he threw me in there, and I loved it. I loved it. As I said, from the first week, I was working over through my lunches, whatever. So,
You would have moved through a lot of roles and seen all the aspects in the different corners of the company as you moved through that 13 years before you bought the business from him.
yeah, I did. But I always, I look back and I used to tell people the only things I didn't do at Mark Supply were outside sales and truck driving. Other than that, computers, inside sales, branch supervisor, warehouse. It, but I ended my career working for my dad in the role of controller, and he was very proud to give me that role. And the great thing was, we all have strengths and weaknesses. One of my weaknesses or non-strengths is attention to detail. And so being, sort of in charge of all the accounting and bank reconciliations and the like, it was a huge, and payroll, huge, great lesson. The lesson being, if you don't, you can do all the business you want, but if you don't pay attention to the numbers and understand what they mean, you know,
Yes. I think it's a great lesson as an entrepreneur because I think that, not being detailed people is often the case. And even if you are a detailed person, like the finances can feel intimidating, but it's
Hmm.
also this huge like risk point for if you don't get it right in terms of knowing the numbers, having the right oversight, all of those pieces, you're always at risk of somebody taking advantage of you.
Absolutely. What you say there's rings so true. And I remember my dad, it's funny, we have these lessons taught to us in one sentence or so, and they stick with us forever. And one of my dad's was, whoever has control of your money has control of your life. So that message was about, okay, where is the money, right? Do you have a huge bank loan? Well, then they're going to have control of your life, your business. Uh, do you have customers that owe you a ton of money? Well, guess what? If the money's sitting in their hands and you can't pay your bills, you're in trouble. So yeah, you gotta understand. You have to pay attention because people, entrepreneurs like to have fun and great ideas and see things grow, but growing sales does not mean growing profit. So there was a time when I said, okay, I want to take this company to 100 million. And I spent a number of years growing the top line and reducing the bottom line. So I always say, if you want to sell more and make less, just come to me. I'm a pro. I have the answers to that one.
There you go. It is so funny though, because there is a point where it makes sense that that happens as you grow, that the
Yeah.
profit diminishes, but you've got to find the way then of bringing the profit back up after you kind of stabilize into the growth pattern.
Yeah. That spending for growth in people, equipment, whatever has to produce, right? Like it's not like you're doing it as an investment, not as a anchor.
Yeah. Yeah, and that can feel scary too,
Oh, so scary.
especially when you're up in you're at 20 million and 40 million and like that investment and the amount of spend is not small.
No, no. And I always say the other one of my lines is it always costs twice as much and takes twice as long as you think it was going to, right? Oh, we're going to
Yes.
spend 100 grand and we're going to grow our sales 10% in the next year. Well, let's start doubling those projections because you're going to spend more than that and take longer than that.
Yes. Well, and I mean that's always the interesting part about projections is you never hit them. Not
Well,
exactly as you plan to, right? You
no, that's
overshoot them,
right.
you undershoot them,
Yeah.
there's always an adjustment that has to
Yeah.
be made in the course of trying to get there.
Exactly. Tony Robbins, who I gone to almost all his courses. And at first I didn't like Tony Robbins. I like what he had to say, but I didn't like the way he delivered his message. And then friends went for a weekend, and so I ended up going to all his programs. But he used to say, the goal is the goal. If that's really what you want, that's the goal. Don't change the goal. Just change how, if it's not working, change how you're getting there. If you're heading left and it's not working, try right. If you're heading right, and then try up, try down. Like try something else. But I used to have sometimes people working for me that would come in month 4 of a year and say, "Jeez, we're not going to make it. We should adjust our numbers." And I'm like, "We're not adjusting anything. The target remains the target. It's up to us to adjust our approach, right? Change things until you figure out what works."
Yep, I think that makes sense in so many ways that's where you have to get creative. Well, and often there's that whole school of thought of, if you want to 1x something, then you're going to probably try to do all of these incremental things to go there. But if you decide you're going to 10x something, you need to reinvent yourself. You need to
Yeah.
look at like completely different ways of making that revenue. And sometimes those are the mindsets we need to put on, right? Is
Yeah.
how are we going to do this differently? Like how are we going to lever ourselves upward? Because I would think that, when you bought the business versus, when you exited the business and it was over that 100 million mark, like those are different businesses.
Yeah, I bought the business from my dad at 8 million and sold it. The sales were coming in over 140 million, which is great. Great numbers, excited. Took 25 years or whatever. I'm a disciple of Dan Sullivan's, and his big program is, 10x based. And I brought that mindset to my company, but I chunked it down because even going to your leaders and saying, we're going to double the size of this business can be mind boggling. And I'm not saying double it in a year, of course. So we did bring the 10X program into my company, but I picked spots for it. Like, let's say we took on the Kohler line, and in the first year, I'm just going to throw out stupid numbers because I don't remember them, but let's say we did $1 million of Kohler. Then I'd say, okay, our next target is 10 million. But what I said is, I'm going to let it be cumulative, meaning we don't have to do 10 million in 1 year. Someday, hopefully, of course, we will. So next year, how far can we get? Can we get to 2.5? Can we get to 5? Right? But that, and bonus accordingly. So, we even had logos, 10X, Kohler, and, had shirts and hats. And the whole goal was to get the team focused on ideas about and talking about how do we 10X this Kohler number. Of course, if it took 10 years to get to 10 million, you didn't do anything. You were still selling $1 million a year. So the
Right.
goal
So
is to,
that's if you do it in 3 and you go, 1 and 3 and 6 or something, then great. But
yeah, we
yes,
crushed it, right? Like,
yeah.
so yeah. And that was my way of, because sometimes an entrepreneur can come into their business and blow their people's minds to the point where people get scared and turtle or run. So, you have to, all these philosophies are awesome, and these business coaches and thought mentors, and I love them. But at the end of the day, it's your business. You got to walk in there and figure out how you're going to manage it, bring it in and make it happen and have it be exciting, not what's happening.
And so, and it makes me think about 2 things what you're saying. Like, so 1, 25 years of overnight success, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's always people are amazed at over 140 million in revenue, like, wow. But yes, 25 years. On the other hand, though, that is still remarkable growth levels year over year over year over the course of 25 years to grow the business to that level.
Yeah. And I was fortunate. I had my big thing is, and I've said this many times, is to do what I did in high school, which is figure out who the smart people are and hang out with them. Right.
Yeah.
The other, challenge sometimes business owners have is they think they have the answers to everything and aren't prepared to, ask. Like, I'm not a logistics expert, so I have 9 locations, 26 trucks or whatever. I'm, why am I coming up with all the answers as far as that? No, I hire the expert, and I pay them well and ask them to implement their ideas, support them where I can, and then we all have to cry when things don't go as planned, but then pull up your pants and keep going.
Start again. Yeah.
Exactly.
So how do you feel like, I mean, you've talked to me before about investing in your own leadership and what it was
Mhm.
like on the journey as the business grew and how you needed to grow to be able to stay up on that. What was that like for you? Because I think it was deliberate that you
It was.
knew you wanted
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
improve.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was really where I think for me as a business owner, I had my fun, right? I went out and, Tony Robbins, Dan Sullivan. I went to Dan Sullivan's program like for over 20 years. I founded, I think, a financial guy because he used to do a lot of people that took his course were financial people. And my financial guy came and said, "Oh, there's this guy named Dan Sullivan in Toronto and Chicago, and he says if you stay, the sort of the claim to fame is if you stay in this program for 3 years, you double the size of your business and double your days off." And we all love a challenge. So the other thing was I think a really important thing to do is admit what you don't know. And one of my challenges was I grew up inside my dad's company. I didn't have experiences of talking to other business people and the like. And so I joined Strategic Coach. All entrepreneurs go to that program. He won't teach anyone that's not self-paid, if you know what I mean, whether you're a 100% or commission sales rep or the like. And so that was a lot of fun. Taught me a lot of techniques and ideas. And then, yeah, I just found like going to industry events, and they can be a downer because we were in the plumbing and HVAC wholesale business, which is not the sexiest thing in the world. There can be a lot of good old mom and pops in there, which are awesome. So I love being able to talk to other business owners and say, "Hey, what are you doing, with customers that are trying to pay by credit card when that whole thing came out? Or what are you doing in this situation?" Loved picking the brains of others. And I laugh, especially Americans, because they'll share anything with you. You're not a direct competitor, right? So I'm just this sweet little Canadian girl, and they'll tell you anything. And so, but still, no matter where you're getting your information, ideas from, at the end of the day, it's you that makes a decision, right? So you can get a great piece of advice and ignore it, and you can get a horrible piece of advice and implement it. But then you got to be the one to say that didn't work. Let's try something else. So I loved it, and I also realized at some point, and we just talked about this briefly, that wow, as my business grows, my job goes from doing things to being a leader. And so I invested hugely in leadership training. For years I had a leadership coach, and I had that coach also be the coach of my direct reports, so that we could strengthen our relationships, and be honest with each other without breaking the relationship.
Right. Yes. And that's so important. Like you said, you've got this big vision for how you want to grow the company, and you have to communicate that vision in a way that doesn't frighten people off.
Hmm.
Right. And
Yep.
so I think that's where, yeah, having that leadership coaching for the group of people can really help everybody to be on that same page and to think, to understand how they're each person's thinking and what they're bringing to the table.
Yeah, Dan Sullivan's one of his things was, what's your three biggest money making activities? And I said, having strong, good relationships with my key employees, my key customers, and my key suppliers, because those are the triumvirate that makes this thing happen. And really, I spent 90% of my time on my employees, on my leadership team, and the leadership team below them, because I figure if we just get it right at the top, good things will happen down below. It's an everyday challenge slash opportunity.
Right. I think that's a really great mindset too, because it means that you trust in your leadership team to continue to cascade that down the company in terms
Hmm.
of the team that got built, the culture that was there, all of those pieces coming out of that top table.
Yeah, and I talked with them, and was sort of like, I would send weekly messages out to the whole company through our inter message system. I'd do videos, I'd go to the branches and have open conversation with the teams in the various locations. So when I bought the company, we had just opened our third location. And when I sold it, we had 9 locations and 3 showrooms. But that communication is so important. And you know, when things are going wrong, get out there in front of your team and take it on the chin and say, yeah, this is not good. And none of us are happy right now, but here's what we got to do to fix it. And I need your help. Right. I think, too many, sometimes owners, especially when things are going wrong, sort of hide in their office,
They
and that's
hide.
not where the
Yeah.
answer is.
The last place to be when something's going wrong.
Hmm.
I agree with that 100%. I think it's interesting too, though, because I mean, your journey started as, I mean, at sort of that 8 million in revenue. You weren't quite an owner operator, but you would have had a lot more visibility to all the levels and all the
Hmm.
people and all the things that were happening. And so that transition for you as well, at that you're talking about now, of you really focused on sort of the people at that leadership level that reported to you, and that's also showing that understanding of, like, you couldn't see into all the weeds of
No,
everything at that point and that size and scale.
no. And, people say, oh, Rob, you're so transparent. I'm like, well, I don't know if it's transparent, but I just want the truth. Right. And so, it didn't work well for a leader if they were trying to hide something. And don't get me wrong, I didn't see everything. I mean, I'm sure I was like talking, and some truck driver on branch number 7 was saying, well, that's not how it happens in our location, sort of thing. I'm sure those things happened. Um, but the thing was, at some point, you can't hide too many things. And the other thing is, if I ever found out you were hiding something in your area of responsibility, then that hugely breaks trust with our relationship and with the rest of the executive team and management team, because someone knows, right? So don't try and, as the president of American Standard used to say, Well, if that's the tree you're gonna hide behind, that's an awful skinny tree, right? Like, come on, guys,
I can see you.
yeah, like, let's just be honest here and say,
Yeah.
oops, is this a problem we're gonna fix, or just admit, right?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, like, that you articulate that in some ways, because in a lot of ways it's how business should be, but I
Yeah,
think it isn't
it's
always.
painfully honest. As Dan Sullivan quote, all progress begins with the truth, right?
Yes, it's true. That is
Yeah.
true. Yeah. Yeah. And so you have now sold the business about almost 3 years ago, or
Yeah.
around 3 years ago
Yeah,
now.
3 years ago, last week, I guess it was.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're on like the 3rd birthday here
Yes,
of
we are.
you. And so, I mean, I can't imagine when you bought this business from your dad that he or you could have ever imagined you could do with it what you did.
Mhm.
I mean, that is just an incredible journey.
Yeah, so fortunate. I mean, not a smooth journey, but exciting nonetheless. Nonetheless, and great people and great mistakes and bad people I held on too long, and but that was my job, is to figure out who the team is that's going to take this to the objectives, and then help them along the way, or carve them out of the herd if I have to. So, and my dad, my sisters would say, you said to me, and many people have, your dad would be so proud of you, which is really nice to hear. He told me he was proud of me before he passed away, which was nice. But I agree. I don't think he or I imagined that it would get to where it got. And I probably wouldn't have had those objectives to get to 100. My number was 100 million, uh, a significant profit at 100 million. Um, and I wouldn't have had those if I hadn't been going to things like the strategic coach, which gets you thinking. I think a lot of business owners are sort of looking at their shoes, looking at their current
Yeah, the
business and
heads
saying,
down,
yeah,
worrying about the day-to-day problems
hmm,
instead of the head up thinking about the longer term big picture future.
yeah, absolutely. And you got to connect the two, right? You can't just be head in the clouds. You have to realize what's going on day-to-day business, but you got to, okay, here's where I want to go. What are the steps? And the steps might go left, and I thought they were going to go right, but you got to be thinking.
Yeah, and it's where I think there are two, I'm sure there are more shades of this, but there are two kinds of entrepreneurs. There's the person whose head is in the clouds and needs to work more on their attention to the steps and the appreciation of that. And then there are people who could stand and look at their shoes all day because they're seeing all the steps. They're not
Hmm.
always seeing the like idea piece coming in.
Yeah. And again, I want to remind your listeners, I ran a very boring old company and a boring old business, which is plumbing distribution, selling toilets, selling furnaces, selling air conditioner. We weren't like, we're going to be a unicorn.
Right.
That's just,
No,
I
but
mean, it's fun to watch those things happen, but I can't even conceive of how to make that happen.
right. Yes. But I think on the other hand, there's just something about like you had this great business in this sort of innocuous place that people wouldn't necessarily think of, and you were able to do amazing things in
Yeah.
terms of
And
how you grew it.
yeah, a really quiet old business, lots of competition. Um, commodity business. We all sell the same copper pipe. We all sell a toilet, whether it's, Kohler, American Standard, whoever's. So, the goal is to figure out how to get people to buy it from you. And that's where, all right, we used to spend a lot of time, our sales reps, we'd say, yeah, of course they can buy it anywhere. And yeah, if you just want to sell for the lowest price, I would say, well, why do we need you? We can just let them buy, get a automated answering system saying, what do you want to pay? Right?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of work. And the other thing I spent, and my team spent a lot of time on, was figuring out how to find efficiencies. I think you and I talked about this previously, but some people, want to sell $1, and no matter what falls out the bottom, sell more $1, and you'll make more money. Mine was, how efficiently can we sell $1? How much of that can we keep at the bottom? And it wasn't through, cost cutting, whatever. It was through, and it sounds like a euphemism, but it's through efficiency. So we bought a program that looked at our pricing and figured out where, you know, if customer A buys 5,000 of these widgets a year, he's going to want a great price for it. But that doesn't mean that great price needs to go to customer PQZ who buy 4 of them a year. The challenge and the mindset of your people who are answering the phone is they know that that thing sells for $1 to the big client, and no one should want to pay more than $1, so they'll tend to quote them $1. So we bought a program called Strategic Pricing Associates, I think is the name of the company. And it would we download all our system pricing and twice a year, I think it was, and then it would suggest new pricing, which was impossible to do by hand, right?
Yes, there's no way.
And yeah, and then we'd sneak in, candidly, non-value known pricing. So if a customer bought this 3 times a year and didn't really pay attention to it, yeah, he would pay $3 instead of $1. And all those nickel and dimes just come plunking down to the bottom.
Right. Yeah, yeah. There was some special project or whatever the case.
So
Yeah.
efficient pricing and then knowing where your money's made. So the other thing is there's a book and I don't know, it was for distributors, but I'm sure it would work in other businesses, called Islands of Profit in a Sea of Red Ink. And again, going to a strategic coach and bumping into another distributor there from California and him telling me about this book, changed my company's life. And really what it does is allow you to evaluate who your most profitable customers are. And again, these are words that Canadians don't like to share with their client base and their employees because they don't like to know that. No one does, I guess. But yeah, figuring out where your money's made and then making sure you put your resources towards it. The first reaction you have when you see the analysis is, oh, I got to cut all these customers because they're costing us money. Not realistic, because they're actually paying, keeping why you have 26 trucks and like things, and why you have 9 locations. But he's and I think his name is Michael Burns. I'm not sure if that's Jonathan Burns. I think it is actually, is going and protecting your key clients, the
Your
ones that are
big
making you the
clients.
most money.
Yeah.
We used to use the analogy, you've got a empty wheelbarrow and people are filling it with money as you go along the year, and then, or your customer base, and then some customers are taking out of your wheelbarrow. So your key is to make sure those people that are putting in your wheelbarrow are well looked after, because if they step aside and look at a competitor and start buying there, you just got a big punch in the face. So,
Right.
and it
Your
was great
wheelbarrow just
because
got a
then,
lot lighter.
yeah, instead of saying, cruises for everybody, we could say, we're going to take customer ABC and allow them to take them and their family, reward them with a personal vacation or go babysit their kids or whatever it is. I'm just giving examples, but I'm not saying we did these things, but you treat them like gold and you protect them because they're the ones you don't want your competitors talking to. And they're the ones that you can, basically the way they buy is why they're profitable. And then you can afford to be competitive with them on pricing. So,
Interesting. Yeah, and that makes sense.
yeah,
Right? But isn't it amazing how when you like, I think that's part of putting yourself out there, is you get these little gems, and I'm sure you read, 11 other books that people recommended as well, but that you just find that one that is
mhm,
so changing to how you view things.
absolutely. And I remember holding it up in an executive meeting saying, guys, this book is going to change our lives. And it did. Now, the key is to do something with it, not nothing, because it can be overwhelming, and not to try and go to the university level of it. Let's just start at grade 1, right? What's the first most simple thing we can do here, right? Instead of trying to, blow your people's brains up.
Yeah. And the idea of not everything in this book might work for us, but there are many things that will. And so we're
Absolutely.
slowly going to work our way through the ones that we think are our best opportunities.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great point, Julie, because not everything in the book would work, right? And let me tell you, the things we did do got pushed back just already, right? Because it's very difficult to turn your team from left to right, or even by degrees. So,
And so now, as you came to the sale, did you
mhm.
make a plan to sell and exit at that time?
I did. It's funny. Well, it's funny. I don't know if the word's funny, but I had always, we had one of the elements of competition in our business was that competitors would spread rumors that my company was for sale or it had been sold or whatever. They, to disrupt or or to confuse or distract my team, right?
Yeah. And
And
your customers.
yes, and my customers, right? And then, what happens if someone's scared or thinking that then they jump ship because they're always getting offers from competitors, right? So I kept saying, guys, this company isn't for sale. I'm not selling this business. Well, then COVID arrived. And that, I don't know if you recall, we talked about it, but people thought they were going to die and there was a lot of pandemonium. And so I had to step really in very strongly as a leader again, because I also thought, I could go bankrupt if they shut down business, right? We could go bankrupt, I should say, because it would affect everyone at that company.
And you didn't
So,
have a business you could pivot to being virtual. I mean, you have a
oh,
business
yeah,
with
no.
things and warehouses and orders to be packed and picked
Yeah.
up and, all of those pieces. So it wasn't like you could just flip everybody over and that was easy.
No, a lot of work. So, and they were the team was excited when we were considered essential and got to stay open because we supply plumbing and HVAC equipment. But I was like, well, that's great, but that's not really how we make our money, with a guy coming in for a new toilet seat. So, so yeah, I really had to step in as a leader, and again, I mean, I always was a leader, but it was a lot of
A lot
communication.
more
Now I was
hands-on.
literally I have to I'm usually a very collaborative leader. Now I had to start commanding a bit because even my direct reports were, coming up with ideas or getting feedback from customers and employees about things that I did not want to happen at my business. So we would discuss it, but then I was much more stepping forward and saying, "This is what we're doing." And then so it was quite tiresome. I'm married to a beautiful woman who lives in California. So I would visit her every 6 weeks to 2 months. And now no travel. So I didn't get to see my partner. Maybe I saw her for about 13 days and 18 months. So that was challenging. I mean, you want to accept it, but not to the point where you can just accept it. And then what are you married for? Right. So that was challenging. And then I just thought, gosh, everyone's got the jitters. If I was a developer, I think I just put a hold on everything right now for all future development, which made me think, well, there could be a recession maybe in the future. And of course, the government was handing out money like mad. And I thought, well, they're never going to lower capital gains. So it was kind of a mix of all these little messages and ideas and experiences that said to me, I think this might be the time to look for and one big element was because supply and demand finally turned and there was much more demand than supply, we were making some very nice profits. So I went to my finance guy, Curtis, who has been with me, gosh, maybe 30 years now, but it was 22 years back then. And I said, Curtis, I think it might be time to sell this business. I know I always said I wouldn't, and I never would, but this could be it. And so yeah, we went out and looked for a broker, and I would always encourage people, if you can get a broker to work with you, and go and do your search for a broker, and because they're the middleman, and they send your messages across the bow to the other team without it becoming personal. I know there's a philosophy that you put two owners in a room and things are going to work out. I've never had that experience personally. I've worked for tried to buy a lot of companies over the years, and it hasn't worked out because they wanted me to pay for the retirement, not for what their company
Mhm.
was worth. But
Mhm.
yeah, it worked out beautifully. I'm very fortunate. And back then there was no travel or anything, so we sold it to an American company, and we did it all online, all through Zoom. We went out and had a videographer take videos of our facilities and do a walkthrough with our VP of logistics and operations, and but they never set foot in any of our buildings before we sold it.
That's amazing.
Hmm.
Really, when you think about it, because they would wanna be checking the inventory and confirming things and, like, all of the pieces that go into that due diligence process. It's pretty big.
Yeah, it was a big transaction all online, and so I have to commend everyone on all sides, the lawyers, the accountants, and the two companies, because big project.
And so what happened to you after that? Did you stay on for a while or did you leave fairly quickly?
No, it's funny. One of my I things was I always said if I sell this company, I'm going to have to walk away because I can't see anyone else raising my child or managing my child. And I also didn't, and I knew because I'm someone who wants to speak the truth coming out of my mouth. That if they asked me to do something
Right.
I didn't agree
You
with,
would
I could
struggle.
never fake it, right? So I just part of the deal was, yeah, I announced and the next day I'm done. And it was great for me. I think it was great for the president who turned out to be my finance guy who took over. But I think I hurt some people's feelings for sure because they were like, oh, you know, we used to see
What?
you every day, or we used to hear from you every day, or you didn't come and do a farewell tour and whatever. So I think I kind of hurt my team a bit that way, but I can't take it back now.
No. No. And I'm sure they missed feeling like your steady hand of leadership after all of that time as well, right? It is a big time of transition when
It
you
is,
when
yeah.
you have an acquisition, and to have you go so quickly would have been shocking for them, for sure.
Yeah, and in my mind, I justified it by saying it's good for the new president to be able, who, by the way, had been with the company many years already. It wasn't like they were being handed off to a stranger. The owner was a stranger, but they were in Chicago. But yeah, I think so. It was kind of, yeah, it was a big adjustment for them in a very like
Short
ripping the
period of
band-aid off
time.
style.
Yeah.
And it's as I say this, I harken back to my dad when he sold me the business, walking into the management team, 6 guys and me, and him saying, "I've sold the company to Robin. She's now the president, and she's now your boss," and walking out. So kind of did that, but
So maybe you are a little like your dad.
yeah, well, this is what they say. The reason you have, is because you're
Yeah,
you're more
because
alike
you're
than
alike.
not. So
Mm, that's good.
yeah,
Well, what an amazing company you built, and amazing opportunity for the team, your leadership team, when you exited to really step up for the new owners as well, even though it may have been a hard time at that moment.
yeah, it was. I mean, the direct reports knew, the next level down, and everyone from there down didn't know. But it was an opportunity for them, and they were. I mean, let's be candid, used to it because as I said, I'm not yet an expert in your area of responsibility for this business. So you're, the quote unquote president of operations. You're the quote unquote president of finance. Da, da. So you need to, you know, step up and take these responsibilities and take the responsibility for the failures and the victories. And so they were used to that responsibility and they liked it.
You hired them as an expert and you treated them as one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it was up to them to perform as one. I would say one of my biggest weaknesses as a business owner was I was too patient sometimes with my team. So they
Yeah,
might
I
not
think
agree. They might have said she's very impatient, but sure, I held them up to a standard and I expected them to meet it. But
but you gave them the opportunity to meet it as well.
yeah, more than once.
Right. Yeah. Yep. And yeah, there's certainly a line where being too patient with someone who isn't performing
Hmm.
reflects on your reputation as the boss.
It does.
But I think it's also important to give people opportunities and not, you also don't want to be known as the person who fires at the drop of a
Yeah,
hat, right?
exactly. It's like
Yeah.
anything, a fine balance between being, patient and supportive and tough, right? Like, and
Yeah, and figuring out how to balance those 2 sides, right? Where it's
yeah,
not, and we all have those times we look back and we were like, "Yep, that should have happened a while ago."
yeah,
And
yeah,
you learn from those things in getting the balance better.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And now you can travel to California and spend time with your lovely wife, as
Yeah,
well as you said you do volunteer work and time with
I
friends.
do.
So, you're still busy.
Yeah, I really am enjoying the volunteer work. They always say you have to have a purpose, and I was like, okay, purpose, because you're growing your business, and the purpose for me in my life was to build such a financial resource to protect the people I love, right? Whether it's, to take care of them no matter what catastrophe might befall them. So that's great. I tick that box. Okay, now what? And so it's just fun. I volunteer at Thrift on Kent in Kitchener, Mennonite organization that sends the money around the world, even and here in Canada, to take care of people that are having challenges. And but it's just I always gave money when I was working because I didn't think and I didn't make time to volunteer. And so I kept saying, "Oh, I'm going to volunteer when I retire. I'm going to volunteer." And at the first 6 months or a year, you're kind of stumbling around, and I was helping at the soup kitchen and things like that. But to really be able to get out there and volunteer and not just talk about it has been joyous. So
Oh, that's so good. Good. Well, I look forward to staying in touch with you. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and what a great business you built.
And Julie, what
Congratulations.
a great opportunity for me to just have fun remembering and sharing stories, and hopefully something meant to someone on the podcast. But to see you go out there and ask people to share their wisdom and their ideas is a wonderful opportunity for everyone, talk with speakers and listeners. So
Well, thanks, Rob, for joining me today.
okay, you take care, Julie.
You too. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please remember to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you won't miss any episodes. Figure 8 isn't just a podcast. It's a way of seeing the big, gorgeous goals of women entrepreneurs coming to life. If you're interested in learning more, you can find my book, Big Gorgeous Goals, on Amazon anywhere you might live. For more about my growth and leadership training programs, visit www.julieellis.ca to see how we might work together. Read my blog or sign up to get your free diagnostic. Are you ready for growth? Once again, that's www.julieellis.ca. When we work together, we all win. See you again soon for another episode of Figure 8.